The morning my mother called me a disappointment, I was standing in the middle of a half-finished barn in rural Vermont, covered in sawdust, and honestly, I had never felt more alive. She didn't know that part. She never asked. I should back up. My name is Nora. I'm the older daughter. My sister's name is Lily, and from the moment she learned to bat her eyelashes at my father across the dinner table, the math in our family was simple. Lily was the investment. I was the question mark. Growing up, I didn't understand it. Kids don't, usually. You just feel it, like a draft coming through a window you can never quite find. I'd come home with straight A's in shop class and my father would say, "That's nice, honey, but what are you going to do with that?" Then Lily would walk in with a B- in AP English and he'd say, "My girl, always working so hard." I stopped trying to make sense of it around age 14. My mother was more subtle. She'd phrase everything as concern. "Nora, I worry about you. You spend all your time in the garage." The garage was where I built things. A bookshelf at 12, a workbench at 15, a standing desk I sold to my history teacher for $80 at 17. To her, it was a hobby, something to eventually grow out of, like a weird phase before real life kicked in. Real life in our family had a very specific shape: college degree, corporate job, husband with good teeth and a 401k, house in the suburbs, 2 kids by 32. That was the template. Lily followed it like a GPS. She went to Ohio State, met Derek in her junior year, graduated with a business degree she never used, and got engaged at 24. I went to a trade program in Montpelier, Vermont. Carpentry and woodworking. 18 months. My father didn't come to the graduation. I told myself it didn't matter. I had scholarships, a part-time job at a local lumber yard, and a plan. I wasn't asking them for anything. That was the part they never seemed to understand. I wasn't waiting for their approval to live my life. I had already left in every way that counted. The summer I turned 26, my parents sat Lily and Derek down and handed them a check for $200,000. A down payment on a house in Columbus. A wedding gift, they called it, a head start. I found out from Lily. She called me, gushing, and I sat on the floor of my apartment with my back against the wall and listened to her talk about granite countertops and primary bedrooms and a 3-car garage, and I kept saying, "That's great, Lily, that's so great." She never once asked how I was doing. I didn't call my parents for 3 weeks. When I finally did, my mother answered and said, "Oh, we didn't think you needed it, Nora. You're so independent." As if that was the reason. As if it wasn't just easier to pour everything into the daughter who fit the mold. My father got on the phone and said, without any warmth at all, "Your sister's building something real, Nora. A family. A home. That carpentry thing is fine, but you need to be realistic about your future." I said, "I am being realistic." He said, "When are you going to grow up?" I hung up. And then I didn't call them again, not for a long time. Vermont in October is something people describe in postcards but never quite capture. The maples turn a color that doesn't exist in paint swatches. The air smells like wood smoke and cold earth and something older than memory. I had moved to a small town called Hartwell, population just over 2,000, after finishing my program, and I'd been slowly building a life there the way I built everything else. From scratch, one piece at a time. I rented a small workshop on the edge of town from a retired man named George who charged me $300 a month and occasionally brought me soup in a thermos when it got cold. I made custom furniture. Dining tables, mostly, some bed frames, a few kitchen installations. I had a website that my friend Danny helped me build, and I got my first real commission from a couple in Burlington who wanted a reclaimed wood dining table, 12 feet long, to seat their whole family at Thanksgiving. I charged them $4,000. I spent 3 weeks on it. When they sent me a photo of it covered in dishes and surrounded by people, I cried in my truck. That was the year everything started to change. By the time I was 28, I had a 6-month wait list. I hired a part-time assistant, a 22-year-old named Sam who was studying design and needed the hours. I moved from my 1-bedroom apartment into a small house just outside town. Nothing fancy, but it had good bones and a big backyard where I could eventually build a proper studio. I took out a small business loan. I got a dog, a golden retriever mix I named Root, who slept under my workbench every day. I was building something real. I just wasn't doing it the way they recognized. I had not spoken to my parents in almost 2 years. Lily texted occasionally, birthday messages, links to articles she thought I'd like, a photo of her living room once she got it finally decorated. I responded politely. We weren't close anymore, but she wasn't cruel. She was just living her life inside the template, and I was living mine outside it, and we had less and less to say to each other. Then, on a Thursday afternoon in early November, I was out at a property on Route 9 measuring for a barn conversion project when a car slowed down on the road above me. I didn't think anything of it. People drove that road all day, but then the car stopped entirely. I looked up. It was Lily's car. A silver SUV I recognized because she'd sent me a photo when she bought it, proud of the heated seats. She was standing outside it now, one hand on the door staring down at the property, at the workshop with its new cedar siding, at the hand-painted sign by the gate that said Nora Calloway Woodworks, at the truck with my logo on the side. At all of it, I watched her face. It moved through several things I couldn't name. Then she got back in the car, and she drove away. I stood there in the cold for a minute, then I went back to measuring. 3 days later, my mother called. I almost didn't answer. My thumb hovered over the screen for a long moment. Root was sitting at my feet looking at me with the calm patience only dogs have, and I thought, okay, fine. Nora. Hi, Mom. A pause. Then, your sister says she drove past your property. She did. Another pause. She said it looked impressive. I didn't say anything. Your father and I have been talking, she said. We think maybe we made some mistakes. I sat down on the stool near my workbench. Okay, I said. What kind of mistakes? With the money. With Lily's gift. We should have included you. I had imagined this phone call many times. I'd rehearsed versions of it in my head during long drives and late nights, and in none of those versions did I feel what I actually felt, which was nothing dramatic, just a kind of quiet steadiness. Like a door that had been unlocked for a while, and I already knew what was on the other side, and I just hadn't decided whether to open it. I don't need the money, I said. I built something here, on my own. We know. Do you? A long silence, then my father's voice came on. He'd been listening this whole time, apparently, and he said, Nora, we see it now. 4 words, we see it now. And I thought about all the years they hadn't. All the shop classes and trade school graduations and $300 workshop rentals and soup in a thermos from George and crying in my truck over a Thanksgiving photo. All of it invisible to them until Lily happened to slow down on Route 9 and saw my name on a sign. I said, I'm glad you can see it. We'd like to come visit, my mother said. If you'll have us. I looked around the workshop. At the current table in progress, white oak, beautiful grain, for a family in Stowe. At Root asleep under the workbench. At the wall where I'd pinned up thank you notes from clients, the Burlington couple's Thanksgiving photo, a sketch I'd done of the studio I planned to build someday in the backyard. I need some time, I said. I'll call you. I didn't call them that week. Or the week after. Danny came by on a Friday night with a bottle of wine and we sat on the porch with Root between us and I told her the whole thing. So what are you going to do? She asked. I don't know, I said. Part of me wants to just let them in. They're my parents. And the other part? I was quiet for a moment. The other part remembers standing in my kitchen at 26, hearing my mother tell me I didn't need the money because I was independent. Like my self-sufficiency was a reason to give me nothing. Like needing less meant deserving less. Danny didn't say anything. She just nodded and poured more wine. I don't need an apology to function, I said. I haven't needed anything from them in years. That's the part I can't explain to people. It's not about the money. It was never about the money. It was about what the money meant. It meant they saw one daughter as worth investing in and one daughter as already gone. And now they see you. Danny said. Now they see the sign on the gate, I said. That's different. She thought about that. Maybe, she said. But maybe it's a start. I watched Ruth's chest rise and fall in the porch light. I thought about the barn, the white oak table, the studio I was going to build. I'll think about it, I said. I called them back in December, a few weeks before Christmas. I didn't invite them to visit, not yet. That felt like too much. Too fast. Like skipping past all the space that needed to be covered first. But I told them about the business. I told them about the business. I told them about Root, and about the Burlington couple and the Thanksgiving photo. I told them about the waitlist and the loan and the studio plans. I talked for almost an hour, and I realized somewhere in the middle of it that I had wanted to tell them all of this for years. That somewhere under the anger there was still a daughter who wanted her parents to be proud of her. My father was quiet for a long time after I finished. Then he said, "You built all of that yourself?" "Every bit," I said. "Then I was wrong," he said, "about what real looks like." It wasn't a grand apology. He didn't cry. There was no dramatic moment. It was just a man admitting in a flat and honest voice that he had been wrong. And somehow that was more than I'd expected. My mother said, "We love you, Nora. We should have shown it better." I said, "Yes, you should have." And then I said, "I love you too." Because I did. I still did. That was the complicated part. You can be someone's daughter and also their disappointment, and also the person who decides you're done being defined by either one. All of those things live in the same body at the same time. Pretending otherwise doesn't make it simpler. It just makes you lonelier. We talked a little more. It was awkward in places, careful in others. But it was real. More real than most conversations we'd had in years. I didn't reconcile with them that December. Not fully. We didn't sit around a Christmas tree and hug it out and suddenly become a different family. That's not how it works. At least, it wasn't how it worked for us. What happened was slower and smaller than that. A phone call here, a text there. My mother asking about Root. My father asking, genuinely, how the joinery worked on a corner joint I'd posted about online. Baby steps across a very long distance. In the spring, I let them visit. They drove up on a Saturday in April. A 9-hour drive from Cincinnati, and they made it without any drama, which I was grateful for. My father watched through the workshop slowly, touching the tools, reading the names on the thank you notes. My mother stood in the doorway with her hands clasped in front of her, not saying anything, and I watched her face and saw something on it I hadn't seen before, a kind of reckoning. She said eventually, "You really did all of this." "I really did," I said. She said, "I didn't understand what you were doing. I thought I was worried about you. But I think I was just afraid of something I didn't know how to measure." That sentence took me a moment. I turned it over in my head. Then I said, "I know." We had lunch at a diner in town. My father talked to George for 45 minutes about lumber prices and didn't seem to notice the time passing. My mother pet Root so much that Root fell asleep in her lap in the booth, which broke some kind of tension in the room and made all of us laugh. It wasn't a movie ending. Nobody apologized perfectly or said exactly the right thing. There were still moments where I could feel the old dynamics hovering nearby, wanting to settle back in. My mother almost made a comment about me finding someone to settle down with and stopped herself mid-sentence. I noticed. I didn't say anything. We're still figuring it out, but I think that's allowed. I think the expectation that forgiveness is a single moment, a door that either opens all the way or stays shut, is one of the things that makes it so hard to move forward. The truth is softer than that. More complicated. The truth is, I am 31 years old. I own a business. I have a waitlist and a dog and a plan for a studio and a wall full of thank you notes from people who sat their families down at tables I made with my own hands. My parents came up 2 more times that year. The second time, my father helped me hang a cabinet door that had been giving me trouble. He's not a carpenter, but he held the level and followed instructions and didn't pretend to know more than he did, which felt like its own kind of progress. There's a line I keep coming back to. Someone left it in the comments on one of my workshop videos once. They said, "The quietest kind of success is the kind you built when no one was watching." I think about that more than I'd like to admit. Because that's what it was. All of it. The $300 workshop rental, the 18-month trade program my father didn't attend, the $80 desk I sold to my history teacher, the soup in a thermos from George, the 12-foot table covered in someone else's Thanksgiving. All of it happened when no one in my family was watching. When they had already written a version of me that didn't quite match who I was. And then my sister slowed down on Route 9. And she saw my name on a gate, and something shifted. I'm not going to pretend the $200,000 they gave Lily doesn't still sting somewhere. I'm human. Money is concrete in a way that feelings sometimes aren't, and what that check represented was years of being told without a single word exactly where I stood. But I also can't pretend that sting is the whole story. It's one note in something longer. What I know now at 31 is this. I didn't wait for permission. I didn't stand at the edge of my life holding my hand out, hoping someone would finally fill it with enough validation to get started. I just started. With what I had, in the direction I believed in a town small enough that my sign on Route 9 means something to people. That's not nothing. That's everything. And the people who finally saw it? I've decided they get to see the rest of it too. Not because I owe them that. Not because the apology was perfect or the debt was paid. But because I choose to. Because I am the one who gets to decide what my family looks like now, and I'd rather build something out of what's left than spend the rest of my life protecting the wound. I'm good at building things. I always have been. They just didn't know it until they read my name on a sign. I've thought a lot about what actually changed the day my father said, "We see it now." Not what it meant to me emotionally, I knew what it meant. But why it happened at all. Why that moment, and not 5 years earlier? Not at my trade school graduation. Not when I sold my first table. Not when I signed a lease on a workshop. The answer, I think, is uncomfortable. People see what they're ready to see. And the only thing that made my parents ready was evidence they could not argue with. A sign on a gate. A logo on a truck. A wait list. Physical, undeniable proof that the path they dismissed had led somewhere real. That used to make me angry. Now it just makes me thoughtful. Because here's what I understand now that I didn't at 26. The choices I made when nobody was watching were the ones that mattered most. Not the ones I made to prove something. Not the ones I made hoping someone would finally notice. The ones I made at 6 in the morning in a cold workshop because I genuinely believed in what I was building. Those were the choices that compounded. That's what built the wait list. That's what put the name on the gate. There's a version of my life where I waited. Where I kept calling my parents, kept asking, kept trying to fit myself into a shape they'd recognize. I've met people who did that. Who spent their 30s performing a version of success for an audience that was never going to applaud the right things. And I feel for them, because I understand the pull of it. You want your parents to be proud of you. That doesn't go away just because you're 28 or 31 or 40, it just changes shape. What I learned, slowly, the hard way, with a lot of lonely evenings in a $300 workshop, is that integrity is a practice, not a reward. It's not something you earn when people finally see you, it's something you choose every morning before anyone's watching. Nora at 24, building a workbench in her apartment. Nora at 27, taking out a loan and losing sleep over it. Nora at 29, crying in her truck over a stranger's Thanksgiving photo. That was the work, that was all of it. My father held a level for me last spring and followed my instructions and didn't pretend to know more than he did. And I thought, that is also a kind of integrity. The willingness to show up somewhere new and learn, even when you're the one who was wrong. I don't think my parents are bad people. I think they were afraid of things they couldn't measure. And fear makes people small in ways they don't always recognize. My mother said it herself. I was afraid of something I didn't know how to measure. That sentence meant more to me than any apology could have, because it was honest. It named the thing. We each get to decide at some point what we're going to do with the people who underestimated us. Keep the distance. Close it slowly. Let time do what arguments can't. There's no universally right answer. There's only the one you can live with. I chose to keep building, and eventually, I chose to let them see it. Both of those decisions were mine. That's the part that matters.